choose to be holy, set apart for you, my master, ready to do your will. Purify my heart, cleanse me from within, and make me holy. Purify my heart, cleanse me from my sin, deep within. Refiner's fire, my heart's one desire is to be holy, set apart for you, Lord. I choose to be holy, set apart for you, my master, ready to do your will. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Please let us learn more as Melany speaks to us, and please let us have a great evening. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Amen.
A generation ago, in one of the most popular shows on TV, Cosmos, the host Carl Sagan began each episode by saying, "The cosmos is all that is, or was, or ever will be." In a nutshell, Carl Sagan was describing the worldview known as naturalism, which is the view that all that exists is the physical, material world, and in which there is no supernatural realm. Naturalism is clearly the predominant worldview in Western culture, shaping institutions like the educational system, the university, and even the media. Naturalism offers non-supernatural answers to our four big worldview questions. First, what is real? According to naturalism, the only things that are real are those that can be tested by the five senses. In other words, only those things that have height, weight, extension in space, and other physical properties. So essentially, if something can't be weighed on a scale or seen through a microscope, it doesn't exist. So things like God, values, purposes, objective morality, demons, and the soul are not real. But of course, things like grass, water, and sand are real. So, what is man? On naturalism, man is not the purposeful creation intended by a loving God, meant to be in relationship with God and with other people. In fact, the late atheist Victor Stenger captured the naturalistic view of man well. Darwinism implies that humanity developed by accident, contradicting the traditional teaching that humans are special, created in God's image. So essentially that means that you and me and all of creation is a cosmic accident. Now the third question is, what happens at death? There are really three options of what happens to you when you die. One would be to face some kind of judgment and go to either heaven or hell. The other possibility is to go through some kind of cycle of reincarnation. And the last possibility is extinction, that when you die, you cease to exist. Now, on the naturalistic worldview, since there's no God and there's no soul, when you stop breathing your last breath, your life is done. Death is final. In the 1970s, the band Kansas had a famous song in which they described human beings as merely dust in the wind, that all our dreams are a mere curiosity. So we're like a drop of water in an endless sea. All that lasts forever is the earth below and the sky above. So then our fourth question is, what is the basis for right and wrong? Since naturalists don't believe in God, there's no standard outside of mankind that determines right and wrong. Well, there are a variety of different attempts to explain morality from the naturalistic worldview. Essentially, it boils down to what benefits mankind and helps propagate the species. Naturalism is nothing new. In fact, centuries before the time of Christ, there were some Greek philosophers who believed that all reality could be described as these small, tiny atoms. While naturalism may not be new, it is in direct contrast and conflict with a Christian worldview. The question is, can it capture reality, both as we experience it and know it to be?
Can anybody, before we start talking about naturalism, can anybody tell me what worldview is?
Okay. Can anybody tell me what worldview, in your own words, means? Yes. Or you think that might be. This is so different than teaching third grade. I've been teaching at third grade. You ask a question, you see everyone like fighting to answer around what it could be, yeah.
So a worldview could be like how you see the world, how you think about it, and what you think is like real, right, or wrong.
Right. So, one more. So, a good way to think about it, it's like wearing sunglasses. What you believe affects what's around you. And I know many times, for example, when I go to the beach, I'm wearing like tinted sunglasses, like that are brown. And then I'm there like, oh look, I got such a big tan. And then I'm like, oh wow. And then I forget that I'm wearing sunglasses. So then when I take them off, I'm like, oh, never mind. And I forget that that's why, like, I see myself tan. Or I'm outside in summer and I'm wearing like tinted black sunglasses and I'm like, oh, it's about to rain. Like, it's so like, ugh, today. And then I forget that I'm wearing, dark sunglasses and I'm like, oh, no, it's bright as day. It was just me. And so worldview kind of does that. It's what we believe, how we perceive things to be is by what we believe. So if you put it in the next slide, the way he said it was a system of beliefs that shapes how we see everything around us. So, for example, people that are Christian believe in Jesus, believe that, meaning of life is different than someone that's a naturalistic person. So, talk about worldview. There was 4 things that he mentioned that define worldview. So those 4 things are real. So what's real? What's around us? What's real? What is men, humans? The other thing is like what happens in death and what is right and what is wrong. So he kind of talked about this in this according to naturalism. And naturalism is pretty much, can anybody kind of tell me in your own words what naturalism is? exactly. So pretty much anything they can touch, anything you can listen, anything you can see is real, but everything else, I mean, it's not. Now, if you... So there's a lot of things, a lot of, in the like you said, in the Western world, so pretty much here in America and in this side of the world, naturalism is really, really big. Can you tell me some way that you see naturalism in, like, in our culture in general? So can you talk to, like, your partner, like, side to side? Why do you think naturalism, how do you see naturalism usually? I'll give some examples before you start. Naturalism, remember, it's things that you can see, hear, or touch, but it's not, that's the important part, it's not things that are supernatural, so things like God, or spirits, or ghosts, or even, it doesn't have to be Christian, it can just be things that are supernatural, that we can't see. So for example, spirits, I don't know, whatever it is that you can't see, that it's not tangible, then it's naturalism. Remember, this is not a religion, this is a belief. So there's like atheists are naturalistic because they don't believe in God, they don't believe in something outside. Evolutionists believe that there's no God, no one created us. You see what I mean? So what other things do you see as naturalism?
Why are you just nodding your head?
Other things well, like, so in ancient world, like in our like Eastern cultures, there's like a lot of different spiritual beliefs that they have. Like Buddhism,
It can also be like movies that like present this view or series that present this view naturally.
Haunted dome. Greek mythology.
Remember that naturalism is like the belief that there's no God. Everything is just nature. There's no God.
but God is involved. Like in cancer, everything that's not proven is therefore unreal.
Okay, so what you guys were talking about, I was kind of listening in. Education, like you said, it's pretty much naturalism. I mean, what we can see is what we believe. The problem with naturalism is that it does not explain things that we can't see, like our emotions, or love, or justice. All those things, how do you explain it? And that's why usually in schools we talk about, you know, the sciences and things that we can see and all that, but when it comes to, we don't study humans regarding emotions, we don't study regarding justice and what stances do we believe, because what is the limits on those things? Technically, for our generation, it's just ourselves. We believe what we think is right, what we think is wrong. There isn't definite stances with being naturalistic, because at the end, who decides that if there's no greater person? So if you see in the next slide, how can naturalism, the belief of naturalism, be dangerous for humankind? Yes.
Anyone?
I was going to say talk again to your neighbor, but you can go ahead if you'd like. I would rather you guys talk for a minute between yourselves. Yeah, so why could it be dangerous? Okay, remember that naturalistic people don't have...
Can you just give us an overview again of how naturalism warming questions.
Okay, I think in the next slide it will tell you that. So naturalistic, according to the worldview, would be what's real is only what we can see. So when you talk about love, when you talk about justice, when you talk about morality, there is no real stance. There is no what you believe to be true, what you believe to be good, doesn't have to be what I believe to be good. So for example, if you think something that might be crazy for me,
That's number 4. That's right or wrong.
yeah, I'm going. But if you think what's real for you, it's not what's real for me. So, now you got me really confused what I was trying to go for. Yes, so what you think that, I don't know where I was going for it, but I'll keep going and then I'll remember. What is men? So men, it's physical, right? We can study what's physical, but again, we don't know inside of men, emotions, justice. Why do we have this belonging to love someone or to want things or all those emotions inside of us? There's nothing in specific. We don't really know anything about it. Death, what's the point of life if after death there's nothing, we just die? Or like Alex was saying, right or wrong. What's the point in the sense of what you think is right might not be the same thing as mine. So how can that be dangerous if honestly right or wrong is according to each person? So how could that be dangerous if there isn't really any limits? Yeah.
After death, because like there's nothing afterwards, there's really not. Some people think there's nothing to live for at that point, so they have a defeatist point of view.
Yeah, that's a good one. So when you believe in naturalism, what is the point of life anyway? I mean, we're here as, we pass by, we were an accident as human beings because we weren't created, we just appeared, and we die and nothing happens. So what's the point of anything really? So meaningless happens to be part of being naturalistic. Yeah. Do you want to say something?
Well, I think it's really dangerous because if you think about it, naturalists, they don't, like, we believe what is wrong or what is right is defined by the moral codes that God gave us. So God gave us like some laws that tells us what's right and what's wrong, but they believe, naturalists believe that since there's no God, nobody has created like that sense of laws other than us, humans. We create our own laws. So we decide what's right and wrong. And that's very dangerous because in different times of history, people can decide what's right and wrong and do really bad things. Like we have seen that, like for example with Hitler. Hitler thought what I'm doing is right and this is what we're gonna do, we're gonna kill the Jews. And in this time point of naturalist, well, he believed it was right, then it was right, right? And that's really dangerous because then anybody can say, well, I think that going into a school and shooting a bunch of students is right, so I'm gonna do it. And who's gonna tell that person no if we're all naturalists, And naturalists believe that everybody has their own right to decide what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, there's in movies you see that a lot. For example, when there's always in action movies, there's someone that wants to end half of the world because nowadays we're overpopulated, so it's like, okay, I'm gonna kill half of the world, that way humankind can keep going. And that's like always the charm of like every movie, because that's what's happening now, but it's for the good of the world. But who says that? Who defines what's good and what's bad? There's nothing to compare it to. There's a lot of things. For example, now there's a big movement, I don't know if you know this, but for pedophilia, to pass it as something normal because technically we were born that way. Not we. They were born that way. But there isn't something to compare that to. What makes it wrong?
And they're actually using that same logic. What they're saying, the people that want pedophilia to
legalized.
To be right, to be okay. Their argument is, well, we believe that is right, and everybody should support us because we didn't choose this, and we believe it's right, and we don't see anything wrong with it. So that's the argument they're using, and technically, if we have a naturalist standpoint, we cannot debate them. I mean,
Yeah, and that's what's happening a lot to America. It's great that as our generation, we are standing up for what we believe and standing up for individualistic thoughts, but at the same time, it's really, really hard to know the limits of things. Because our generation, there isn't a right and a wrong. There is a, if you believe it and I believe it. I mean, whatever you believe, you are free to believe what you believe. I'm free to believe what I believe. But there is no limits to that. Yeah, there's no rules that tells you what it is right or what it is not. And that's why naturalism is kind of dangerous to believe in. So, that's all we already talked about that. So, Ecclesiastic actually talks about Solomon. You know how Solomon is in the Bible? Can anybody tell me what Solomon, who is he in the Bible? Solomon. Not you. Solomon.
I'm hoping that by me doing this, other people will get competitive.
Okay, he was attributes of Solomon. He was very
Solomon?
smart. Yes. Solomon sounds like it. Solomon.
Solomon? Anyone?
He was a
the son
king. David, good. There we go.
What position did he hold? He was king.
King,
He's
good.
known as a king wife. Like, what was important about Solomon? He was wise. There you go. That's all you need to know.
There we go. So the point of Solomon is that he was really, really, really rich. He was the richest man in the world at that moment. He was super smart. He was pretty much whatever good thing that you think might be good, he had it. Like, he was amazing. Yeah, he wrote Ecclesiastes, which is super depressing. Because it literally saying that everything in life is meaningless. Like, he's saying, oh, I have all these riches, I have all this money, but at the end of the day, it's meaningless. Like, what's the point of having all this money? Oh, I get all the pleasures in the world, and I can do all the things that I want, but what's the point? So it's literally what he talks about. He's just saying, like, meaningless, everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all the work that they do? And generations come, and generations go, and the earth stays the same, and it's just, what's the point of life? Because that's what naturalistic believes, and that hasn't been just something now. I mean, before, yes, people believed more in gods and in spirits and all that stuff. But there's always that belief if I depend on myself, then what's the point? And if we don't have God in our lives become so meaningless. And if we don't have God to tell us what is right and what is wrong, there's really no limits. And it just really life gets super, super, super confusing when you try to go into this naturalistic point of view. And it's really funny because our generation really has this naturalistic point of view, yet at the same time we are very into like helping the world and doing good for others, which is super contrasting what we believe. Because what is it that makes us, you know how there's a lot of people that say, what's the point of being a Christian if there's other people that do good in the world? You know what I mean? Like there's people that do good in the world, but they're not Christians. Like, I mean, what drives them to do good in the world, you know? And that naturalistic belief that's not a thing. Like, things, emotions, and beliefs, and the soul is not a thing. So in one way, they're believing that those things don't exist, yet they're driven to help. They're driven to, get water to places and give people clothes and help the world and have justice and fight for rights of, people. And so we're living in both extremes where we are driven by our emotions, yet at the same time we both don't know what's right and wrong. So it's a very confusing world right now that we live in. But I think that, thank God that we have God to tell us what's right and what's wrong, and to tell us that we are worthy and that we do have value, and that our lives are not meaningless, and that actually when we die, we actually will be able to go to heaven and actually have something to look forward to. And that's why it's so important to be a Christian. It's not just because, whatever, I'm a Christian. It's because we actually have value, and we actually live for something, and it's not just life is meaningless. So, yeah.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you. So, before we pray, I just wanted to add that most of the really famous thinkers of geniuses that we know from the past, a lot of them believed that there had to be some kind of God, including Albert Einstein, just because they realized that naturalism didn't answer those 4 questions. And in that alone, those really genius people thought there has to be some kind of God, because if not, how do you answer this? And actually one of them, I don't remember which one it was, and I don't want to say it was Einstein, but it was one of them, actually came up with this idea of science. If naturalism is the true thing to believe, science has a big problem, because we will never be able to answer completely a question without asking ourselves why. So what he meant by that is that naturalism actually tries to explain these questions, but then as soon as you try to explain it and you ask why, they don't have an answer. So they say, yeah, so humans were an accident. And you ask why. And that's where it ends. And then they say, well, humans don't really have a purpose. Why? Well, yeah. Well, humans are the only species out of all the animals, the only species that evolved to have a rational mind. And you're like, why? We don't know. So naturalism actually doesn't make much sense. Even though it's the belief, the worldview that is tied the closest to science, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So you guys should really have this hope that, our worldview, Christianity, actually answers better most of these questions than any other worldview, including the science worldview of naturalism. So let's just pray, and then I'll make one announcement, and then we can leave. So, dear Heavenly Father, we want to praise you because you are good. We want to praise you because you are real. And we want to praise you because you're with us. Thank you because today we can be grateful that you are real, that you exist, and you created us with a purpose. And you are guiding us in this journey to study your word, through studying the things that are happening in our world and the views that there is, so that we can better understand other people and better talk to them and be able to explain to them by also knowing what they believe. We love you, and we want to put this beautiful day, Saturday, in your hands, so that we can just spend it with you and be blessed in your presence. We love you, and we pray these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. So, quick announcement. Next Friday, there is no Vespers. So, make sure to tell your friends and to tell the friends of your friends that next Friday there's no Vespers, because we're going to be up in Gatlinburg. So, it's going to be really fun. And if you haven't registered for Gatlinburg, you can still register. You have until Sunday to do so. So,